I'm not gonna lie, things seem pretty dire right now for the environment, conservation, and wildlife here in the United States. Because of what the new administration is doing, people are worried. Things are, quite honestly, in chaos right now. Funding is being cut. People's jobs are on the line. Even whole departments within our federal government are being threatened of take it away. And it's not quite clear yet what things are going to hold, what things are allowed. We're still working that out, but people are understandably worried. I've been getting messages, emails in my inbox about people losing their jobs or worrying about losing their jobs. As I was scrolling through Instagram the other day, I recently came across a post that offered some hope. It was a message to people looking for jobs in this current administration. And the person who wrote this post, they secured a job under the first Trump administration. And what I could see is that this post was really needed by people out there. Like, some people said they read the post and they were crying afterwards because they just needed this help and encouragement. That post really inspired me. Last time on the podcast, I talked about dealing with this new administration, but more in terms of keeping our pro-conservation and pro-environmental movement and voices out there. But I really didn't offer a lot of advice specific to career seekers for wildlife, environmental, and conservation jobs. And if you are not new to this podcast, you'll know that it's a huge focus of mine. I wanted to take time today to address specifically those who are looking for jobs in this field or even have a job already, but you're worried about losing it. Honestly, no matter where you are in your career, the advice today is going to apply to you 100%. So for those of you who are in wildlife, environmental, or conservation careers, panicked and wondering, how do I handle this new administration? How do I handle this new landscape? I don't want to give up my lifelong dream of having a wildlife career. This is what I'm meant to do. This is my mission. This is my purpose. Then stick around. This episode is for you. And it breaks my heart when looking at this Instagram post to see some people comment that they're thinking about leaving this career because of what's going on. So stay tuned. This is for you. This is going to help you. You don't have to leave your career. And I am here to continue adding hope to that post and spread the message that there's going to be jobs for you here still, that you are needed, that your work is important and is valuable. Today, I'm going to give you concrete tips on what you can do if you are in a wildlife profession, how you can navigate this new administration and landscape. First, I want to start off with a story because I really think it sets the tone for where I want to go today. When I was in a postdoc position at the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences, I was worried about finding a full-time permanent position. I was scared that I wouldn't be able to land a permanent job. For those of you who don't know, a postdoc position is temporary. It happens after your PhD, and usually they're like 1 to 3 years, but mine, I was lucky to have this experience. It was 5 years. And if you know my story, then you'll know that I took this postdoc with the intention of staying in that location, Raleigh, North Carolina, indefinitely. I really wanted to move there and just stay there. I'll link to a video that tells you my whole story. Just quickly, I was sick of moving around. I wanted to have a home where I could have my animals and my family, and I just didn't want to move around. So the idea of having a postdoc and then being there for a couple of years and moving to a completely new city again, it just didn't vibe with me. So I wanted to stay put. So once I got this postdoc and I was in Raleigh for a while, and I didn't get a permanent job right away, I started to panic. And as a postdoc, people always ask you, like, what's next? What's next? What's your career goal? And as a postdoc, people are always asking you, like, what's next? How is your job search going? What jobs are you getting interviews for? There's this pressure to land a permanent job, and you have it on yourself, but then you have everybody around you asking it. So it adds to this pressure. So I was in therapy talking to my therapist, and she asked me, what is your biggest problem right now, or your biggest worry, your biggest concern? And I said that I won't land a permanent job. And she just sat there and looked back to me and she's like, well, no job is permanent. And I was like totally perplexed by this. I was like, what do you mean no job is permanent? Like, you have a permanent job, you're a therapist, you're in those organizations, people hire you, they're paying you, you show up to work every day. My job, it has a deadline. I don't know what's next for me. I don't know if I can land a permanent. I don't know if I can get a job. And she said the idea of a permanent job is an illusion because anything can happen. This is so true. And this advice is just not only for wildlife careers, it is for all different types of careers. We thought that jobs in the tech sector would be in demand, but now Mark Zuckerberg recently said something along the lines of AI can replace mid-level coders. So people who are coding things for our software, for websites, etc., they might be replaced by AI within a couple of years. So there's no permanent job, and anything can happen to a company, especially nowadays. When my parents were growing up, it was more like you got a job and you stayed there and you worked with the company for decades. That doesn't really happen anymore. And that's not really the common thing anymore. Even my partners who have been in quote unquote safe careers, they have still gone from company to company every couple of years because these companies have had layoffs. They have gone under. Some of these companies have folded. They've ran out of money. So the idea of this permanent job, she's right. It's an illusion. Anything can happen at any time. And that really changed the way that I thought about things. This is unfortunately what is going on here in the United States. Now, we don't know to the extent that it's going to happen because the president is doing things and a lot of these things are being fought in court because they are unconstitutional. But I will say that one thing is clear. There are going to be fewer jobs in the federal government and or less funding available from the federal government. They do have power over that. And having lived through the George W. Bush presidency, when I was in graduate school, this was common chatter that the workforce for the federal government was going to decline. For instance, people would talk about situations where government workers would retire and then their jobs would not be replaced. Instead, they took the workload that they were doing and they spread it around amongst different federal employees already existing. So they were hiring for fewer positions. And in the Republican administrations, this does happen here in the United States. They tend to be not strong on the environment, and there's just fewer jobs for us. There's fewer funding. In addition to jobs provided by the federal government, they also provide funding through grants. So this not only affects the federal work, but this also affects nonprofit sectors or organizations like zoos and museums that can get government funding. If you're a professor, the majority of your funding comes from the National Science Foundation. And that has been frozen. It is now unfrozen, but it's not clear what is happening. But again, it still looks like the funds are going to be reduced. Long story short, there is going to be an impact. But how much do we have to freak out? The answer is always you don't have to freak out. And I don't want you to freak out because what happens when you freak out, you go into panic mode. And just physiologically, when you go into panic mode, when you start worrying, we are evolutionarily designed to worry and to focus on things that are not going well for us. And if you think about our ancestors on the landscape, and some people live like this still today, you're scanning for danger. You're scanning for dangerous animals that can kill you and stuff like that. But nowadays, for most of us, we don't have that anymore. So other worries and fears have propped up. But that evolutionary instinct of looking for danger, from a physiological standpoint, though, what happens when you're experiencing fear or worry is that you get a fear response. You get a fight or flight response. And what these hormones do is that they make you more active in those areas. So you're ready to run, you're ready to fight, and you're not relying on your brain as much. So it is really important to calm down so that you can think clearly and work through these issues with a calm focus where you can make the most intelligent strategic decisions that will benefit you. And that's what I'm here to help you do today. If you take the advice that my therapist gave me that no job is permanent, you won't be rattled by the things around you, because that's always going to be in the back of your head. And that's not to scare you. I don't want you to be like constantly worried every single day you go to work, like, oh my God, my job is not permanent. But rather, you are going to feel confident and prepared because your resume and your CV is always going to be up to date. You're going to be working on getting the skills that you need, getting the trainings that you need. You're going to be on the lookout for amazing opportunities and networking. That's the type of attitude and mindset that I want you to have and adopt. And when you have this, then you really can thrive in your career no matter what happens, and nothing can rattle you. The first thing I want you to do is sign up for my free training, Becoming a Wildlife Professional. This started out as one webinar. It is now 3 as free trainings because I just have so much stuff to share with you. And an important part of my programs that I do with my students is on mindset. So we will talk about that in the free training. But really, this is the best place to start. And the first training starts next week. If you're hearing this sometime in the future, I run these every couple of months. So go to the link. It is fancyscientist.com/ each word is separated by a hyphen. I'll also put the link in my show notes. And this is something I do year round, so make sure that you sign up. This will help you. Let's go back to mindset. Mindset is key. This is what I teach my students in my group mentoring program, The Successful Wildlife Professional. They don't think they need mindset. They think they need the cover letter techniques, the resume techniques, the networking techniques, etc. And they do, but those things will not be as effective unless you have the right mindset. So I make sure to teach them about mindset, whether they think they need it or not. I'm gonna put another podcast recommendation for you here in the show notes, or if you're on YouTube, I will add a card. I highly recommend you watch it. It is on Sarah Blakely, the founder of Spanx, and her attitude and how this applies directly to wildlife careers. And when you have this attitude, you can succeed no matter what. So you want to develop a really strong mindset. A big part of developing a strong mindset is understanding what beliefs are working for and against you. The ones that are working against you are called limiting beliefs. And through my Successful Wildlife Professional program, I teach my students how to identify their limiting beliefs, dismantle them, and then replace them with empowering beliefs. And one of the steps in that process is to look for evidence, collect evidence. So us being in the situation as we are in this new administration, what are the thoughts that are currently running through your head? Oh my God, I'm going to lose my job. I'm not going to be able to get another job. There are no jobs in wildlife. The competition is so crazy. I definitely can't stand out. I need to switch my career. I'm never going to be able to work in the job that I love. Write these thoughts down and start identifying what they are. And then what you're going to do is separate some fact from fiction. What is just a thought that doesn't really have anything to it? It's just a fear that is going through your mind. And what is actually reality? Like, yes, there might be more competition, but does this mean you will never be able to work in wildlife again? No. Might you have to take another job that is a non-wildlife job to pay your bills? Yeah, that totally could happen. But does that mean you will never work in wildlife again? No. And if you need real concrete examples of that, I will give you more podcasts. You can check out the podcast with Liz Keeley's. There's the podcast with Jeffrey Hunter. There's the podcast with Rebecca Mowry. All of these will be in the show notes. But in each of those cases, they worked non-wildlife jobs. In the case of Liz Keeley's, she worked at a pesticide company. I was really surprised. I didn't know this for a couple of years and then returned to the wildlife sector. Rebecca Mowry, she graduated with her master's degree and worked at Starbucks for a little bit, and she did some seasonal temp work. And then she landed a permanent job working for the Montana State Agency. Just because you're taking these little detours doesn't mean that your life and wildlife careers is completely over. No matter what is happening in the federal government right now, there will always be jobs in conservation in wildlife for several reasons. First, there are Republicans who care about this. This is something I talked about in my last podcast, Conversations and Connection, tips for navigating conservation post-election, podcast number 122. But some of my biggest followers on social media are, what I found out, they're Trump voters. Do you think that no Republicans, no Trump voters visit national parks? I talked about in the last podcast too, how there was this New York Times article talking about how the right won crunchy. Crunchy is a term used to describe people who are more outdoorsy. They're more like homesteaders. They're more natural. Do you think those people never go to national parks, that they don't support wildlife conservation? No, not necessarily. There are definitely going to be nonprofits around that are dedicated to conservation. We need our state agencies to manage wildlife. That's going to hold true no matter what. There's going to be private organizations like zoos. Some museums are private. There's going to be just lots of jobs out there that you can get in wildlife. Also, we're going to talk about looking at jobs laterally, but there's jobs that have impacts in wildlife that are not directly a quote unquote wildlife job. You could be working for an organization in sustainability, and that has huge impacts on wildlife. So not all of these jobs are going to go away. It might feel right now that people are anti-environment or they don't care about climate change, but that is not the case. Trump says a lot, and the news says a lot, that he was given this mandate. And yes, he did win the presidency, obviously, and the Republicans hold the House and the Senate. But think about how many people didn't vote. Think of how many people didn't vote. Think about also just like all the people in states like New York and California. I'm from New York State, where you know the outcome is going to be Democrat. So no matter how you feel, no matter how you want to vote, a lot of people don't think that their presidential vote matters because they know what the outcome is going to be. This popular vote doesn't even necessarily reflect the actual popular opinion of what is going on. The Senate is an incredibly slim majority, and the House is the slimmest majority that we've had for either a very long time or forever. I can't remember the exact statistic, but it is incredibly slim. It's not like all 50 states turn red. No, this country is divided. And refer to the previous podcast too, the Trump voter is nuanced. There are people who voted for Trump and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. There are people who voted for Trump that had voted for Biden in the past, Obama in the past, and they have very different agendas. So it is very complicated, and we can't just say it's very complicated. And just because somebody voted for Trump doesn't necessarily mean they are in favor of all the things that he's doing right now. I do feel that people feel emboldened right now. For example, on Facebook, I see a lot of posts from people who never talked about Trump before. They are Trump voters, and they seem to have kept it secret before, and now they're speaking out. But Trump was very unpopular during his presidency. So what's going to happen? Listen to the other podcast and keep your voices strong. Remember that it's complicated out there, and there's a lot of people who care about the things that you care about. Also, remember that the pendulum swings, and it's been swinging for the past 2 decades. I talked about being in graduate school when George W. Bush was president. Then it went to Obama. Then it went to Trump. Then it went to Biden. Now it's back to Trump. So it may seem like our country is on a certain trajectory, but it is not 100% that way. We should take the results of this election seriously, though, and the Democrats really need to look at themselves. I encourage you to get involved, but my main take-home point is that it's not just some strong mandate. People care about the things that you care about. Next, we're going to talk about if you don't have a job and you're trying to get a job, or if you got laid off, What should you do? But first, I just want to make sure that you subscribe to this podcast if you like what you're hearing. If you could leave a review, oh my gosh, I will send you eternal good vibes. It means so much to me and it helps others find this show. If you're finding these tips helpful, please share them with somebody else who could use this advice. These work. I've learned them from other people. I've implemented them in my life, and I've seen my life change dramatically as a result of this advice. And that's why I share it with you guys. Let's get into what to do if you are looking for a job. Say you've just graduated and you know the competition is stiff, or you have been let go of your job. As I mentioned, definitely sign up for my free training, the Becoming a Wildlife Professional series. But what are some more concrete tips that you can do? The best thing that you can do during this time is really to work on your career. I have tons of advice out there, tons. This is podcast 124. I have hundreds of YouTube. I have hundreds of blog posts out there. I have my book, Getting a Job in Wildlife Biology. Take this time and really apply the advice I give you to get a job. My advice works. I have a group mentoring program, The Successful Wildlife Professional. Yes, it is an investment, but it is worth it. My students get jobs. The results speak for themselves. In the Becoming a Wildlife Professional training, on the very last day, we go over the details of the program. In the second half of the training, you will get all of the details there. But I've also had people, now they really have to dedicate a lot of time to doing this, but I've had people get jobs with the free advice that I give out there. I also have programs of different investment. For example, you can get started with resume revamp. Today, for just $47, I even have a payment plan to make this affordable for everyone, where you can do 3 payments of 7, where you can do 3 payments of 7. I talk to so many people who are like, my resume sucks, like it's not getting me interviews. Well, you have to change something. If you keep doing the same thing over and over again, you're going to keep getting the same results. Really take this time and focus on your career. Now, I understand you have to make money too, of course, to pay the bills. And as I mentioned before, with the examples of the people who have permanent paid jobs in the wildlife field, just take a job right now to just make your ends meet. I have a free PDF I'm going to put in the show notes. These are jobs that anyone can do. Some of them you can do in your pajamas at home. But I really need you to shift this scarcity mindset. And I have a full podcast about this. There are opportunities out there to make money. Yes, I understand it's not wildlife jobs. It might suck to think that you have to do Uber or pet sit for Rover, things like that to make ends meet. But this is unfortunately the reality of our career. Even in the good times, there is high competition. I come from a theater background. I used to want to become an actress. It's similar to that. Same thing with writing careers and art career. You do it for your love of it. And yes, you want to get paid. And there are jobs out there that are paid well, but it's going to be more competitive. And there's no shame with taking a temporary job that is not in your field to make ends meet. And the thing that I love about this PDF is that you get to do things on your own schedule. For example, with the dog walking, you can pick up a gig here or there. My friend, she did Rover. People would drop off these small little dogs at her house. She would watch them for a week and she would make $1,000 a month easily just for having this like little dog in her house, and she would let the dog out and take care of it. It wasn't that much work. So can you house sit? Can you pet sit? There's virtual assistant work you can do online. My former virtual assistant said that there's 1,000 ways to make money, but there's only a few ways to make an education. So get scrappy. If you want this, you can make this happen. There is a misconception out there that this field is only for the wealthy. And I have another money podcast that I'm going to link. There's so many podcasts that tie into this. Nobody that I knew in this field And aside for one person I can think of, and he's more tangential in this field, he does more filmmaking. But none of my friends were rich. None of them. None of them were wealthy. In fact, a lot of them were living at the poverty line, below the poverty line. They had debt, and most of them have permanent jobs right now. So there's this misconception that you have to be wealthy to succeed in this career. You don't have to invest in expensive internships or experiences abroad. You don't need that at all. In one of my podcasts with Matt Snyder, he did do one of those experiences, but he talks about how he saved his money for a summer to do it, that he worked. So you guys can do this. This is doable. There's so many opportunities out there. Like I said, you can do Uber and work a couple of weekends and make a couple of $100 and really apply yourself to working the advice that I give you to make your job applications better, to get the experience that you need. In the becoming training, we talk about all this stuff in depth. So you'll have some steps that you can take, some actual action plans that you can implement to make this happen. You can get jobs. My students get jobs. I see it happen. Other things that you can do. Are you networking like crazy? Are you on LinkedIn? Is your networking profile, is your profile up to date? Are you interacting with people? Are you sending cold emails? Are you going to local conferences? Since moving to the Chicago area, there are so many opportunities here. I found out about this local conference that I never heard of before. It's called Wild Things, and I'm going. And there's so many people from many different organizations around here, like the Lincoln Park Zoo and the Field Museum. And if you're in more remote areas, trust me, there are opportunities, there are conferences for you. Our local parks department runs nature walks. I go on those just for fun, and I meet people to network with. There's so many more experiences than you realize. And this is what I teach in depth in the Successful Wildlife Professional. We go into networking in depth. I have hours of video teaching you how to do these things. What else you can do? You can get creative with how things happen for you. I love this phrase, what can I do? When something isn't working or I feel stuck, I ask, what can I do? What can you do? Are there creative ways to go about getting what you want? For instance, say you want experience doing science communication, but you can't get any. Well, create your own. I interviewed Hannah Mulvaney, and this is what she started doing. She started creating graphics, creating social media content, and became so good at it that people started to ask her to pay for her services. Can you start a YouTube channel? You can make money on YouTube. I just finished this book, The YouTube Formula, with lots of examples in it of people who quit their day jobs because their YouTube channels become more profitable. It is not as crazy and far-fetched as you think. So what can you do to be more creative? Maybe there is an opportunity that you want to do, and for some reason you can't afford it. Let's say there's this field assistant position and you can't afford the cost to move there. Let's say it's even a paid field position, but you need some moving costs. Can you start a GoFundMe and pitch the GoFundMe to the people around you, not as I need money to advance my career, but I am working on this important conservation initiative, and in order to help endangered black-footed ferrets, I'm raising funds to cover moving costs to be able to do this work. When I went to the Society for Conservation Biology, they had a whole talk about this. And maybe you are in a job, a permanent job right now, but you rely heavily on grants, and those grants are being frozen or they're shrinking. Can you do a GoFundMe project for the conservation projects that you run? It requires storytelling skills. It will require some efforts on your behalf to shape the story, maybe create some videos. But at the SCB meeting, they're talking about how this is such an underutilized technique. So where can you be creative? Maybe you can start a side hustle. Again, I have a whole podcast about this, But there are examples of people who are making money by teaching things like how to do hiking, how to do overnight backpack hiking. Can you teach somebody how to identify birds through song? If so, you can start an online course and charge people for it. Again, this is not crazy. These are the steps that I have used to start my own business. It all started with me creating this post, and I talk about this in the Side Hustle podcast of I'm thinking about creating an online program teaching people how to get jobs in wildlife. Are you interested in this? Drop an emoji or comment below and I'll send you some more information. And I think I got 20 people to sign up for my first program, and they paid me for it. And I did this before I even created the content. So this is all possible for you, but you got to get creative and you got to get scrappy. And you also have to think outside of the box, and just that there's like this one way to do it. No, the world is your oyster nowadays. It's so exciting. There are so many creative solutions out there. And the best part is that these tactics can be carried over into your career when you get a permanent job. When you get a permanent job working for a nonprofit, you can use that example of, oh, I did a fundraising campaign. I did a GoFundMe campaign to cover my field season costs during graduate school. For example, I remember when I was in graduate school, my friends would apply for these small grants to cover things like gas doing their field work. Their research projects were local. So instead, can you do a GoFundMe project? And I understand people feel icky or weird about asking people for money, but this is what nonprofits do all the time. But it's for the conservation. It is for the research that you're doing. It's not like you are pocketing the money. It's to cover the costs. It's just a different way to do it. When you're applying for a grant, you're still asking for people for money. Yes, it's a more conventional approach, but I know you can do unconventional things, and you can carry this success into your career and get noticed. And this is what is going to give you long-lasting success in your career. The final thing that you can do is look at careers that are tangential to your career that will build up skills for wildlife jobs so that you can more easily transfer those skills when wildlife jobs become more abundant. A great example of this is GIS, which is widely used for many different companies. The government is a great example. I know funding is being cut across the board for government, but I know, for example, like the census, the Department of Transportation. And remember, the Department of Transportation is at the state level in addition to the federal level, but they use GIS a lot. So maybe you take one of those jobs like that and really develop your skills and get paid for it, get paid well in one of those jobs. Do what I'm telling you to do in terms of the job advice. Really work on your job applications and apply for the wildlife jobs out there. When you get one, you will have those skills. Your skills will have gotten better, and you will be able to transfer easily into that wildlife job while not having to take jobs that maybe you're not as interested in, like Uber, or just jobs to make money. And you would still be building a career for yourself. Use the job tracker to really understand what skills, and especially those hard skills, like what concrete things are people looking for? For example, are they looking for statistical skills? Can you get a job elsewhere that really enhances your statistical skills or your programming skills, or maybe things like doing JavaScript or Python, things like that you can apply to wildlife careers. So when those careers open up, you are going to be polished. You are going to have those years of experience. One of the biggest struggles that people face is that when they graduate, there's really incredibly few jobs out there that just accept recent grads. They really want experience. So you got to get that experience somewhere. And this is a great way to do this. This type of thinking, this roundabout thinking, is what you need to develop to succeed in wildlife careers, no matter what is going on in the administration. And after you sign up for the Becoming a Wildlife Professional free training series, your next homework assignment is to watch the podcast that I did on Sarah Blakely. Because like I said, I know you're here because you want the advice specific to wildlife fields, but your mindset is the most important thing. When you have a mindset like her, she did not take no. She was told no over and over and over and over and over and over again. She broke the rules largely because she didn't know what the rules were, but this is what led to her success. So stop thinking small, stop thinking conventionally, and get your head outside the box. If you follow my advice, you're stubborn enough, you stick to it long enough, this can't not work. You will get a job. And I look forward to hearing from you about the job you get. For real, do not hesitate to contact me, send me messages. I am so excited for your success and I want to celebrate it with you.